Have you ever witnessed a company sign its own financial death warrant out of sheer arrogance? I have. And it all started in that boardroom where I realized the only coffee cup on the table was mine, untouched, getting cold. Just like the atmosphere when they told me my 15 years meant nothing. They thought they were cutting dead weight. What they actually did was pull the pin on a $250,000 grenade I'd buried in our contracts years ago. This is how one signature destroyed a CFO's career. My name is Amelia Grant. And at 34, I'd spent nearly half my life building something I thought mattered at Northbridge Dynamics. Senior Contract Specialist. The title sounds boring until you realize I was the one standing between this Fortune 500 company and catastrophic legal exposure. Every merger, every acquisition, every partnership worth more than 7 figures had my fingerprints on it. I'd saved them from litigation 17 times. I'd restructured deals that salvaged $40 million in revenue. But none of that mattered on that Tuesday morning when Victor Hale, our new CFO of exactly 93 days, decided I was expendable. The summons came through Slack at 9:47 a.m. Not email, not a phone call. Slack. Please report to conference room C immediately. No subject, no context. Just those 7 words that made my stomach drop like I'd missed a step going downstairs. I'd seen this before. The surgical precision of corporate execution always starts with vague urgency. Conference room C was what we called the fishbowl. Glass walls on 3 sides, deliberately chosen when they wanted everyone to see the blood but not hear the screams. Victor sat at the head of the table, his $2,000 suit catching the morning light in a way that made him look like a poorly rendered video game villain. To his right, Margaret from HR clutched her iPad like a life raft, her eyes fixed on the wood grain of the table as if she might find absolution in its patterns. Amelia. Victor said my name like he was reading it off a spreadsheet. Please, sit. I remained standing. I'll need more than please to make this comfortable. Victor. He didn't flinch. Men like Victor never do. They've practiced emotional flatness in the mirror until their faces could pass for drywall. Your position has been deemed redundant, effective immediately. Redundant. 15 years reduced to a word typically reserved for backup generators and spare tires. I felt the laugh building in my chest, bitter and sharp as burnt coffee. Redundant, I repeated, tasting the word. The person who literally wrote your partnership agreements. Redundant. Margaret finally looked up, her voice a rehearsed whisper. This is a restructuring decision. It's not personal. Of course not, I said. Nothing's ever personal when you're erasing someone's existence from the building directory. I turned to Victor. Who's taking over the Morrison Industries contract? The one with the military procurement riders? His left eye twitched, the first crack in the facade. That's no longer your concern. Right. And the penalty clauses in the Steinberg merger? The ones that trigger if we miss a single compliance deadline? Amelia. Or the continuity provisions I built into our vendor agreements, the ones you personally signed off on last quarter without reading past page 2. The room went silent except for the distant hum of the HVAC system. Margaret's fingers hovered over her iPad screen. Victor's jaw clenched so tight I could hear his dentist crying. Security will escort you to your desk, he said. You have 15 minutes to collect personal items. No client contact. No internal communications. Your access has already been revoked. Already revoked. They'd pulled my digital existence before even telling me I was dead. I looked at the coffee cup I'd brought with me, still full, steam rising in delicate spirals toward the recessed lighting. Such a normal morning thing, coffee. Such an absurd prop for professional murder. 15 years, I said quietly. And you give me 15 minutes. Victor stood, buttoning his jacket in that way men do when they want to signal a conversation is over. The decision is final. Margaret has your paperwork. The paperwork, the holy documents of corporate severance, the NDAs and non-competes and agreements not to sue, the signatures that would seal my silence and guarantee my disappearance. Margaret slid the stack across the table with practiced efficiency. a pink sticky note marking every place I needed to sign away my right to dignity. But as I picked up the pen, their pen, company logo gleaming on its barrel, I remembered something. Something buried so deep in our contract infrastructure that even I'd almost forgotten about it. A beautiful little poison pill I'd planted 3 years ago after taking the fall for someone else's incompetence. A safeguard I'd never thought I'd need. I signed every document without reading a single word, my signature flowing smooth and careless as water. "Thank you for your service," Victor said, the words falling from his mouth like he was tipping a valet. I picked up my coffee cup, still full, still warm. "You're welcome, Victor, for everything." Security was already waiting outside the fishbowl, 2 kids who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. As they walked me through the cubicle farm toward my soon-to-be former office, I caught the eyes of my colleagues. Some looked away, some mouthed, "I'm sorry." Most just stared, already calculating how to divide up my accounts. My parking space, my ergonomic chair. 15 minutes to pack 15 years. It should have felt like tragedy. Instead, all I could think about was that continuity clause, sitting like a landmine in Section 47B of our primary vendor agreement. The one Victor had auto-signed during his first week, too eager to look decisive to actually read what he was deciding. He'd just fired the only person who knew it existed, and in exactly 30 days, it was going to detonate. The security guards flanked me like I might steal the water cooler on my way out. Derek and Josh, I'd helped Derek's wife with her employment contract when she joined accounting 2 years ago. Now he couldn't meet my eyes as we walked past the break room where I'd eaten 5,000 lunches, past the printer I'd unjammed more times than I could count, past the window where I'd watched 14 seasons change while building contractual fortresses for people who just reduced me to a line item. My office, former office, had already been sanitized. My nameplate was gone from the door, leaving only 4 small holes in the wood like evidence of a crime. Inside, someone had placed a single cardboard box on my desk, the kind you'd use to ship books or store Christmas ornaments. 15 years. And they'd pre-calculated my life would fit in a box that cost $1.79 at Staples. 15 minutes, Derek mumbled, positioning himself in the doorway like I might make a run for it with company secrets stuffed in my blazer. I opened my desk drawers methodically. "Personal items only," they'd said. But what's personal after you've lived more waking hours in this office than in your own home? The stress ball from the Morrison acquisition, was that personal? The coffee-stained legal pad where I'd first sketched out the partnership structure that saved them $8 million in taxes, personal or proprietary? The photo of my team from the 2019 holiday party. Back when we still had budget for actual parties instead of grocery store cookies in the conference room, definitely personal. Thoroughly worthless. Into the box it all went. My orthopedic seat cushion, the jade plant that had somehow survived the fluorescent wasteland, the emergency blazer that had seen me through 16 last-minute board meetings, my lucky pen, the one I'd used to sign every major deal, including the one that would soon bite Victor Hale in his perfectly pressed ass. My computer screen was already locked, displaying the corporate screensaver, an endless loop of the company logo morphing into meaningless shapes. My email, 8 years of correspondence, thousands of contracts, gone. My shared drives, inaccessible. Even my phone had been remotely wiped while we walked here. I pulled it from my pocket to find it factory reset, asking me to choose a language like I'd just arrived on this planet. "It's nothing personal," Josh offered from behind Derek, apparently thinking repetition would make it true. "You're right," I said, carefully wrapping my law school alumni mug in a spare legal pad. Erasing someone from existence is the most impersonal thing you can do. The worst part wasn't the deletion, it was the speed of it. While Victor was still forming the word redundant, someone in IT had been executing my digital death. My keycard, deactivated. My parking pass, void. My very existence in the Northbridge Dynamics ecosystem had been marked for deletion before I'd even been informed I was dying. They'd probably drafted my position's new job posting while I was still signing their paperwork. I found myself staring at the wall where my diplomas had hung. Georgetown Law, summa cum laude, the certificates of achievement. The email from the CEO himself thanking me for exceptional service during the Steinberg merger. All of it reduced to slightly darker rectangles on beige paint, ghost marks of a career that apparently never mattered. But as I placed the last item in the box, a paperweight shaped like Themis, goddess of justice, a gift from a client I'd saved from a $10 million breach of contract, I felt something shift. Not sadness, not even anger anymore. Something closer to anticipation. Because Victor Hale, in his 93 days of infinite wisdom, had made one crucial error. He'd assumed I was just another corporate drone, too beaten down by policy and procedure to have protected myself. He'd never asked why someone with my qualifications had stayed in contract management instead of moving to legal. Never wondered why I'd insisted on personally reviewing every renewal, every amendment, every seemingly minor clause. He definitely hadn't read Section 47B, subsection 3, paragraph 2 of our primary vendor agreement with Steinberg Industries. The continuity clause I'd inserted after the last time Northbridge had thrown me under the bus. The one that required 30 days written notice to all primary vendors if the designated relationship manager, specifically named as Amelia Grant, was removed from her position. The one that included a fascinating penalty structure if that notice wasn't provided. $250,000. Auto-triggering, non-negotiable. "Time's up," Derek said, tapping his watch. I picked up my box, surprised by how light 15 years felt. As we walked toward the elevator, employees pretended to be deeply absorbed in their screens. The ones brave enough to look up offered those pitying half-smiles reserved for the condemned. By lunch, they'd be picking over my accounts like vultures on carrion. By tomorrow, someone else would be sitting in my office, probably that Princeton kid Victor had brought in last month. The elevator descended in silence. 23 floors of awkward nothing. Just the weight of my box and the sound of Josh's nervous breathing. The lobby security desk had already been notified. The guard barely glanced up as he held out a clipboard for me to sign, confirming the return of my keycard, my parking pass, my humanity. "Sign here, and initial here," he said. The same tone you'd use at the DMV. I signed with flourishes, each signature a small rebellion. The revolving door expelled me onto Madison Avenue like the building itself was spitting me out. October wind cut through my blouse. I'd left my coat inside, but there was no going back. Not for a coat, not for anything. Standing there on the sidewalk, holding my pathetic box while taxis screamed past and strangers pushed around me, I should have felt destroyed, discarded, humiliated. Instead, I checked my watch. 10:43 a.m. In approximately 3 hours, Northbridge's automated HR system would update. My status would officially change from active to terminated. That update would sync with their vendor management portal. The portal would flag the change to all primary vendors. And Steinberg Industries' own automated system, beautiful, efficient, merciless, would detect that their designated relationship manager had been removed without proper notice. Then it would generate an invoice. 3 years ago, I'd been sitting in conference room A, the executive floor, where the carpet was thick enough to muffle screams and the coffee came in actual ceramic cups. The Steinberg Industries deal was hemorrhaging money. $250,000 already gone because someone had missed a critical deadline for regulatory filings. That someone was Brad Morrison, Victor Hale's predecessor, who'd been too busy playing golf with board members to notice the dates I'd highlighted in red across 17 different emails. But Brad had tenure, Brad had connections, Brad had a handicap of 12 and a daughter at Wharton. I had a performance review coming up. Amelia, the previous CEO had said, his voice dripping with manufactured regret. "We need someone to take responsibility. The board is demanding answers." Take responsibility. Corporate speak for be our sacrificial lamb. I'd sat there, watching Brad examine his manicured nails while they hung me out to dry. My bonus, evaporated. My promotion, indefinitely postponed. My reputation, tarnished with a failure that wasn't mine. "I understand," I'd said, Because what else could I say? Fight back? Demand justice? That's not how you survive 15 years in corporate America. You swallow the poison and smile while it burns your throat. But that night, after too much wine and not enough sleep, I'd pulled up the Steinberg contract renewal on my laptop. We were their exclusive logistics provider, a relationship worth $40 million annually. The contract was dense, 300 pages of legal architecture that no one else would ever read completely. Perfect. That's when I'd crafted Section 47B, subsection 3, paragraph 2. It was elegant in its simplicity, hidden in a wall of standard continuity provisions, nested between force majeure clauses and termination procedures. I'd inserted my insurance policy. If Northbridge removed me as the designated relationship manager without 30 days written notice to Steinberg, a penalty would trigger $250,000, payable within 5 business days, non-negotiable, non-refundable, automatic. The beauty was in the automation. Steinberg had invested heavily in contract management software that year, the kind that tracks every clause, every deadline, every obligation with algorithmic precision. They'd actually been thrilled when I suggested integrating our systems. Fewer human errors, they'd said, more efficiency. I'd presented the renewed contract to Brad myself, watching him flip directly to the signature page, exactly as I knew he would. Everything standard? He'd asked, pen already hovering. Completely standard, I'd replied. Just some minor updates to the continuity provisions for supply chain protection. He'd signed without reading a single word. They always did. The renewal had gone through legal, of course, but Northbridge's legal department was overwhelmed, understaffed, and trained to look for liability, not hidden advantages for employees. They'd rubber-stamped it, the board had approved it in a consent agenda. 30 seconds of consideration among 100 other items. Every year since, the contract had auto-renewed. The clause had been copied into our agreements with 6 other major vendors. I'd been thorough. Each time, I'd held my breath, waiting for someone to notice. But why would they? I was reliable Amelia, keeper of contracts, protector of corporate interests. I'd saved them millions in litigation, caught hundreds of unfavorable terms, negotiated dozens of advantageous positions. Why would they suspect I'd also protected myself? Victor had inherited the whole beautiful mess when he'd arrived 3 months ago. His first executive decision had been to sign the pending renewals to clear the deck, as he'd put it. I'd watched him in the conference room, designer pen flying across signature pages, probably thinking about his tea time or his Tesla payment or whatever men like Victor think about when they're not actually thinking. Amelia, he'd said, sliding the stack back to me. I assume you've reviewed all of these thoroughly? Every word, I'd assured him. Several times. He'd actually smiled then, that practiced executive smile that never reaches the eyes. Good to have someone I can trust with the details. Trust. He'd used that word while signing the document that would destroy him. The clause was very specific about the notice requirement. Email wouldn't suffice. It required formal written notice on company letterhead, delivered via certified mail to Steinberg's legal department. 30 days meant 30 days. 29 would trigger the penalty. And the designation was personal. Amelia Grant was named in the contract, not just designated relationship manager or authorized representative. They'd never send that notice. Why would they? In their minds, I was already gone, erased, forgotten. Victor probably thought he was being efficient, cutting dead weight, streamlining operations. He'd probably already promised my salary to his Princeton protege, already calculated the savings in his quarterly projections. He had no idea he'd just signed a check for $250,000. The best part, the part that made me smile standing there on that October sidewalk, was that the penalty was tied to Steinberg's automated systems. No human intervention required, no appeal process, no negotiation. The moment my termination hit Northbridge's system, it would trigger a cascade of automated processes that no one could stop. Like dominoes falling in a locked room, beautiful and inexorable. I thought about calling someone at Steinberg, maybe giving them a heads up. But why? This wasn't personal. It was just business. Just contract terms, just the law. Besides, they'd find out soon enough. Standing there with my box of meaningless mementos, I realized I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years without knowing it. Every time I'd renewed that clause, every time I'd watched another executive blindly sign it, I'd been building my own golden parachute, thread by thread. They thought they were firing a contract specialist. They were triggering a contract. I walked 12 blocks before I realized I was still carrying the box. The October wind had turned bitter, cutting through my blouse like accusations. But I didn't feel cold. I felt something else entirely, a weightlessness that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with physics. Objects in motion, equal and opposite reactions. Corporate karma measured in contractual clauses. A coffee shop materialized on the corner, one of those aggressively quaint places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, where freelancers pretended to write novels while burning through trust funds. I pushed through the door, found a corner table, and set my box down like I was laying a coffin to rest. The barista, pierced and indifferent, took my order without looking up. Large Americano, oat milk, no sugar. My usual, though she'd never know that. I was just another unemployed corporate refugee seeking shelter among the creative class. While she pulled shots, I pulled out my personal phone, the one Northbridge had never touched. My work phone was dead, wiped clean before I'd even left the building. But this one still held my contacts. My real life. The parts of me that existed beyond the 40th floor of that glass tower. No missed calls, no texts. Word hadn't spread yet, though it would soon. The corporate gossip network was more efficient than their actual communication systems. By happy hour, everyone would know. By Monday, I'd be mythology. Another cautionary tale about job security in the age of quarterly earnings. I didn't care. Let them whisper. Let them speculate. Let them craft their narratives about what I'd done wrong, how I'd failed to play the game, how they would have seen it coming. None of them knew what was actually coming. The beauty of the trap I'd set wasn't just its inevitability, it was its invisibility. Right now, as I sat here with my overpriced coffee, Northbridge's HR system was humming along, processing my termination with algorithmic efficiency. Status updates cascading through databases. Access revoked, passwords changed, existence erased. All of it automatic, irreversible, and absolutely transparent to their vendor management portal. Steinberg's system would receive the update like any other data point. A small change in a massive flow of information, but their contract management AI, the one they'd paid $3 million to implement, would recognize the significance immediately. It would parse the change against every active contract, every clause, every provision, and when it found Section 47B, subsection 3, paragraph 2, it would do exactly what it was programmed to do. Execute. No human would even see it initially. The invoice would generate automatically, route through their standard approval chain, and land in Northbridge's accounts payable queue like any other bill. Except this one would have a very specific note in the memo field. Penalty for breach of continuity provision per contract section 47B3. 2. Failure to provide 30-day notice for removal of designated relationship manager Amelia Grant. $250,000. Due within 5 business days. The first person to see it would probably be some junior accountant, fresh out of college, who'd assume it was an error. They'd flag it for their supervisor. The supervisor would check the contract. Then they'd call legal. Legal would pull the full agreement. Read Section 47B 3 times, check the signature pages, and realize that, yes, this was real. Yes, it was enforceable. Yes, Victor Hale had personally signed the renewal. Then the real panic would begin. I could picture it perfectly. The frantic emails, the emergency meetings, the desperate phone calls to Steinberg trying to work something out. But Steinberg wouldn't work anything out. Why would they? The contract was clear, the penalty was legitimate, and any deviation from the automated process would require board approval, which would take weeks. Meanwhile, the 5-day clock would be ticking. Victor would probably try to blame legal for not catching it. Legal would blame contracts, meaning me. Except, I wouldn't be there to blame anymore. They'd probably try to claim I'd acted in bad faith, that I'd somehow tricked them. Good luck proving that. The clause had been in place for 3 years, renewed annually, signed by multiple executives. It wasn't hidden or deceptive, it was just unread. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda in accounting, one of the few real friends I'd made in that tower. OMG, just heard. Are you okay? This is insane. I typed back, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, good, Victor's a snake, Brad 2.0, want to get drinks later? Rain check. I have some things to take care of. Things like opening a bottle of wine I'd been saving. Things like updating my LinkedIn profile. Things like absolutely nothing at all, which felt revolutionary after 15 years of constant crisis management. The coffee shop filled with the lunch crowd, more refugees from nearby offices, stealing an hour of freedom before returning to their own glass towers. I watched them huddle over their phones, their salads, their illusions of importance. 3 days ago, I'd been one of them, convinced that my next contract review, my next successful negotiation, my next saved million would finally earn me the recognition I deserved. Now I knew better. Recognition was just another corporate currency, as worthless as the mission statements they printed on mouse pads. Real power wasn't in being recognized, it was in being underestimated. I finished my coffee, left a 20 on the table, overtipping felt like another small rebellion, and picked up my box one last time. Outside, the city churned on, indifferent to my personal apocalypse. Taxis honked, pedestrians pushed. The sun broke through the clouds for just a moment, lighting up the glass towers like monuments to ambition. Somewhere behind one of those windows, an automated system was about to discover what I'd left behind. A $250,000 time bomb, ticking away in Section 47B. I turned away from the towers and walked home. Behind me, the fuse was already burning. At 2:17 p.m., while I was halfway through a bottle of Sancerre and a Netflix documentary about corporate fraud, the irony wasn't lost on me, my personal phone lit up with a notification from LinkedIn. Someone from Steinberg Industries had viewed my profile. Then another. Then 3 more in rapid succession. They knew. I pictured the scene at Steinberg's headquarters, probably playing out in some sterile conference room identical to the one where I'd been terminated that morning. Their automated system would have generated the invoice at exactly 2 hours TPM. I knew their batch processing schedule by heart. It would have routed through their standard workflow, generated, reviewed, approved, sent. No human intervention required. Beautiful. The invoice itself would be a masterpiece of algorithmic precision. I'd seen Steinberg's standard penalty notices before, clean, professional, utterly devoid of emotion. Just lines of data stating facts. Invoice, DRSI, 2024, Pen 4847. Date, October 15, 2024. Due, October 27, 2024. Amount, $250,000. Re-1. Contract breach, continuity provision violation. Description. Failure to provide 30-day written notice for removal of designated relationship manager. A grant per Section 47B3, 2, of Master Service Agreement payment terms. Net 5 days, late payment penalty, 5% per day. No anger, no negotiation, no human touch whatsoever. Just numbers and dates and contractual reality, generated by machines that didn't care about office politics or quarterly projections or Victor Hale's ego. My phone buzzed. Linda again. Holy shit, something's happening. Victor just got pulled out of the board meeting. He looked like he was going to vomit. I poured another glass of wine, letting it catch the afternoon light streaming through my apartment windows. The Sancerre was excellent, a small luxury I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed to qualify. At Northbridge, the invoice would have landed in their automated accounts payable system at 2:15 p.m., standard transmission time. Some junior processor would have opened it, seen the amount, and immediately escalated it. From there, it would have moved up the chain with the speed of panic, supervisor to manager to director to CFO to Victor. I could see him so clearly. Probably standing in his corner office with its panoramic view of the city, reading the invoice for the third time, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, horrible understanding. He'd call legal first, then contracts, then, inevitably, they'd all realize the same thing. The only person who could explain this was already gone. Her access revoked, her existence erased from their systems. Another text from Linda. Emergency meeting called, all hands, conference room A. This is insane. Conference room A, the executive floor, where they made the big decisions, where they decided who lived and who died in the corporate ecosystem. Now they'd be gathering around that polished table, trying to figure out how a dead woman had just sent them a bill for $250,000. The phone rang. Unknown number. 212 area code. Northbridge's main line. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Then again. On the fourth call, I recognized the number, legal department. They were getting desperate. Good. Desperation was what you felt when you realized you'd signed your own death warrant in triplicate. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Grant, this is David Liu from Northbridge Legal. Please call immediately. Urgent matter regarding Steinberg contract. David Liu. I'd worked with him on the Morrison acquisition. Smart, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when he needed to be. He'd figure out the clause, understand its implications, and know exactly how screwed they were. He'd also know there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. Another unknown number calling. This time I recognized it. Victor Hale's direct line. The CFO himself, the man who deemed me redundant 3 hours ago, was now personally calling the ghost he'd created. I declined the call and blocked the number. The beauty of the penalty wasn't just its size, though $250,000 would definitely hurt. It was what it represented. Steinberg would now know that Northbridge had violated their contract. Other vendors would hear about it, the board would ask questions, auditors would flag it, and at the center of it all would be Victor Hale, the new CFO who'd managed to trigger a $250,000 penalty in his first 100 days by firing someone without reading the contracts she managed. My laptop chimed with an email notification. I'd been expecting this. Northbridge had no way to contact me except through my personal email, the one I'd never given them, but that was easily found online. From David Liu. Subject. Urgent. Immediate response. Required. Body. Ms. Grant. We need to discuss the Steinberg matter immediately. This appears to be a misunderstanding that can be resolved quickly if we can speak. Please call me at your earliest convenience. A misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it. Not a termination. Not a restructuring. Not Victor Hale's arrogant incompetence. Just a misunderstanding. I archived the email without responding. Another email. This time from Victor himself. From Victor Hale. Subject. Important. Please contact immediately. Body. Amelia. There seems to be some confusion regarding your transition. We need to discuss this urgently. I'm available at any time today. Your transition? Not your termination. Not our mistake. Certainly not our $250,000 fuck-up. Just my transition, like I'd chosen to transform into unemployment that morning. The phone buzzed with another text from Linda. They're losing their minds. Legal says the penalty is real and enforceable. Victor looks like he's aged 10 years in 10 minutes. I smiled, raising my glass to the empty apartment, somewhere across the city. In a conference room with panoramic views and executive leather chairs, Victor Hale was learning what I'd learned 3 years ago. In corporate America, the only real power is the power you write into contracts when nobody's watching. The invoice would stand, the penalty would be paid, and Victor Hale would spend the rest of his hopefully brief tenure at Northbridge knowing that the nobody he'd erased had left behind a $250,000 reminder that everyone is essential until proven otherwise. And the proof was going to cost them dearly. By 4 p.m., the 40th floor of Northbridge Dynamics had descended into controlled chaos. I knew because Linda had become my personal war correspondent. texting updates with the breathless excitement of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. Victor locked himself in his office. Won't take calls. Legal team just brought in outside counsel. Outside counsel. Amelia. Someone from the board just showed up. The board? Security's been told to watch for you in case you try to enter the building. As if you'd want to come back to this shit show. I sat in my apartment, afternoon sun painting golden stripes across my hardwood floors, reading each message like dispatches from a battlefield. The wine was gone, replaced by tea. I wanted to be sharp for this. Clear-headed, present for every beautiful moment of Victor's unraveling. My email inbox was filling up faster than I could archive messages. David Liu had sent 3 more increasingly desperate attempts at contact. Someone from HR, not Margaret, probably too senior for her now, had reached out about clarifying certain administrative matters. Even the CEO had sent a carefully worded message about exploring resolution options. Resolution options. They wanted to negotiate with a ghost, bargain with someone they'd already buried. The gossip network, meanwhile, had gone into overdrive. LinkedIn was lighting up with views from Northbridge employees. My phone buzzed with texts from former colleagues who'd heard whispers, rumors, fragments of the truth. The story was already mutating as it spread through the corporate ecosystem. Heard you booby-trapped a contract before leaving? Someone said Victor's getting sued for wrongful termination. Is it true you're getting $1 million settlement? None of them had it quite right, but they all sensed blood in the water. Corporate sharks circling, waiting to see who would survive and who would be eaten. At 4:47 p.m., Linda sent a message that made me sit up straight. Emergency board meeting called for 5 p.m. Victor's been summoned. This is it. The board. They'd want answers. How had this happened? Who was responsible? What would it cost to make it go away? And most importantly, who needed to be sacrificed to maintain the illusion of competent leadership? I pulled up Steinberg's contract on my personal laptop, scrolling to Section 47B. Such an innocuous placement, buried among standard continuity provisions that every company included, but no one actually read. The language was crystalline in its clarity. In the event that the designated relationship manager, currently identified as Amelia Grant, is removed from their position without 30 days written notice delivered via certified mail to Steinberg Industries' legal department, Northbridge Dynamics agrees to pay a continuity disruption penalty of $250,000. There was no wiggle room. No force majeure clause that could save them. No alternative interpretation that would make this go away. Victor had signed this. The board had approved it. Legal had reviewed it, or claimed they had. My phone rang. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize, but the caller ID showed a name, Harrison Beck, chairman of Northbridge's board of directors. I let it ring. He called again immediately, then sent a text. Ms. Grant, I would appreciate 5 minutes of your time. This is Harrison Beck. The chairman himself, the man who'd hired Victor, who'd probably approved my termination in some rubber stamp board session between golf stories and stock options. Now he wanted to chat, leader to unemployed nobody, as if we were equals. Another text from Linda arrived, this one with a photo attached. She'd snapped it covertly through the glass walls of conference room A. The image was blurry but telling. Victor at one end of the table, shoulders hunched, face in his hands. The general counsel standing, gesticulating wildly. 2 board members I recognized, Stevens and Chen, looking at documents with expressions of disbelief. Heard Stevens ask how anyone could be stupid enough to fire someone without checking their contracts first. Linda wrote, Victor actually said she was just a contract manager. Just a contract manager. Even now, even with a $250,000 invoice burning a hole in his desk, he still didn't understand. I wasn't just a contract manager. I was the keeper of promises, the architect of obligations, the one who knew where all the bodies were buried because I'd written the contracts for the shovels. Another email arrived, this one from Steinberg Industries. From Jennifer Walsh, General Counsel, Steinberg Industries. Subject, Contract Penalty Notice. Confirmation Body, Ms. Grant, we hope this message finds you well. We wanted to confirm that our automated systems have processed the continuity provision breach as outlined in our master service agreement. The penalty invoice has been issued to Northbridge Dynamics. We understand you are no longer with the company, but as the designated relationship manager named in the contract, we wanted to inform you of this action. We look forward to working with your replacement once the 30-day notice period has been properly observed. Professional? Distant? Perfect. Steinberg didn't care about the drama, the politics, the human cost. They had a contract. The contract had been breached. The penalty was due. End of story. I forwarded the email to my personal archive, then deleted it from my inbox. Evidence for later, if needed, though I doubted it would be. The beautiful thing about automated systems was their indifference to human drama. They didn't care about Victor's career or Northbridge's reputation or my feelings. They just executed code, followed protocols, generated invoices. At 5:23 p.m., Linda sent her final dispatch of the day. Board meeting over. Victor seen leaving the building with a banker's box. Repeat. Victor Hale is carrying a banker's box. I stared at the message, feeling something I hadn't expected. Absolutely nothing. No joy, no vindication, no triumphant surge of revenge satisfied. Just a hollow echo where my career used to be and the quiet understanding that we'd both destroyed each other. Him with his arrogance, me with my foresight. The only difference was, I'd known it was coming. My phone buzzed one more time. Harrison Beck again. Ms. Grant, on behalf of the board, I want to discuss your potential return to Northbridge in a senior capacity. Please call at your convenience. Return. They wanted me to come back, to clean up the mess, to save them from the consequences of their own casual cruelty, to be their salvation after being their sacrifice. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Outside my window, the city was shifting into evening mode. Office lights beginning to twinkle on. Workers flooding the sidewalks. The great machine of capitalism churning through another shift change. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale was carrying his own banker's box, feeling the weight of 15 minutes that had cost him everything, somewhere else. An automated system was calculating late fees on an invoice that would never be negotiated, never be waived, never be anything other than what it was. A $250,000 reminder that contracts, like karma, always come due. The emergency board meeting reconvened at 7 p.m. I knew because Harrison Beck had left me 3 voicemails, each more desperate than the last, and because Linda, loyal Linda, had stayed late specifically to feed me intelligence. They're all here, she texted. Full board, legal team, outside counsel, even brought in someone from Steinberg. The Steinberg representative would be there to confirm what everyone already knew. The penalty was legitimate, non-negotiable, and immediately enforceable. They'd probably brought their own legal counsel, their own copies of the contract, their own polite but firm insistence that business was business. I'd turned my phone back on but kept it on silent, watching the missed calls accumulate like points in a game I'd already won. 14 from Northbridge numbers, 6 from Harrison Beck personally, 3 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably board members or outside counsel, pulled from their dinner plans to deal with this crisis. At 7:34 p.m., Linda sent me a photo that would later become legend in certain corporate circles. Someone had written on the whiteboard in conference room A, in neat block letters, "How did we get here?" Below it, a timeline. Number 9, 47 a.m., Grant terminated 2 p.m. 7:10 p.m. Automated invoice generated 2:15 p.m. Invoice received 3:30 p.m. Penalty confirmed as valid. File 5:1 p.m. Initial board meeting 5:30 p.m. CFO transitioned. CFO transitioned. They couldn't even write fired on their own whiteboard. The general counsel would be walking them through it now, explaining how a single clause in a 300-page contract had just cost them their CFO and $250,000. He'd probably prepared a PowerPoint because that's what corporate lawyers do when they need to explain failure. They make slides. Slide 1, The contract was valid and properly executed. Slide 2. The clause was unambiguous and enforceable. Slide 3. Victor Hale had personally signed the renewal. Slide 4. The penalty had been triggered automatically. Slide 5. We have no legal recourse. But the real presentation would come when they asked the question that mattered. How did she know to put this clause in 3 years ago? That's when they'd have to explain Brad Morrison's betrayal, the previous cover-up, the scapegoating that had led me to protect myself. They'd have to admit that this wasn't random or vindictive. It was predictable. A consequence of their own pattern of sacrificing employees to protect executives. At 8:15 p.m., my laptop chimed with an email that made me laugh out loud. From Northbridge HR Department. Subject: Employment Verification Request. Body: Dear Ms. Grant, we've received a request for employment verification from several companies regarding your tenure at Northbridge Dynamics. Please be advised that we can only confirm dates of employment and final position held. We cannot provide performance information or reason for separation without your written consent. They were already getting calls from recruiters. Word was out that I was available, and the market was responding. Meanwhile, they couldn't even admit they'd fired me without my permission. The irony was delicious. Linda's next text arrived at 8:47 p.m. They're discussing whether to pay or fight it. Stevens just said, we pay. We pay it now. We pay it quietly. And we never speak of this again. Stevens was smart. Fighting would mean litigation, discovery, depositions. It would mean admitting in court that they'd fired someone without reading the contracts she managed. It would mean revealing Victor's incompetence, the board's negligence, and the systemic dysfunction that had allowed this to happen. The $250,000 was actually cheap compared to what a public legal battle would cost, not in legal fees, but in reputation. Another text. They're asking if you'd come back. Harrison Beck literally said, what would it take to get Grant back? What would it take? They couldn't afford it. Not because I'd demand too much money. Money had never been the point. They couldn't afford what I'd demand in terms of respect, authority, and protection. I'd want Victor's salary, Brad's severance, and a contract with so many protective clauses it would make Section 47B look like a handshake agreement. But more than that, I'd want them to admit what they'd done. Publicly, on the record. And that was something a company like Northbridge would never do. At 9:23 p.m., the meeting finally ended. Linda sent one final intelligence report. It's over. They're paying. Legal's been instructed to wire the money tomorrow. No contest, no negotiation. Someone asked if they should try to sue you for embedding the clause. General counsel actually laughed and said, for what? Doing her job too well. Doing my job too well. That's what had saved me. I'd been so good at protecting Northbridge's interests that when I'd protected my own, I'd used the same meticulous attention to detail, the same forward-thinking strategy, the same bulletproof language that had saved them millions over the years. The final email of the night came from Harrison Beck himself. From Harrison Beck. Subject: Resolution Body, Ms. Grant. The board has met and decided to honor all contractual obligations regarding the Steinberg matter. We acknowledge the validity of the provision and will remit payment within the specified time frame. Additionally, I want to personally apologize for how your departure was handled. It does not reflect the values of Northbridge Dynamics or the appreciation we should have shown for your years of service. If you would consider discussing a return to Northbridge in a senior capacity, with full restoration of benefits and significant additional compensation, I would welcome that conversation. The board has also voted to review all employment practices to ensure situations like this never occur again. Respectfully. Harrison Beck. Never occur again. They'd learn from this, implement new procedures, add checkpoints and reviews and layers of protection, but they'd learn the wrong lesson. They'd focus on catching hidden clauses instead of treating people with dignity. They'd worry about contractual traps instead of wondering why their employees felt the need to set them. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale was updating his resume, trying to figure out how to explain a 100-day tenure that ended with a $250,000 mistake. Somewhere else, Northbridge's accounting department was preparing to wire money to Steinberg Industries, marking it down as a contractual obligation in their books, hiding the truth in corporate euphemism. And somewhere in conference room A, maintenance was probably erasing that whiteboard, wiping away the question, "How did we get here?" As if erasing it could undo the answer. They'd gotten there the way all companies do, one small cruelty at a time, one sacrificed employee after another, until someone finally decided to sacrifice them back. The wire transfer hit Steinberg's account at 9 a.m. the next morning. $250,000 transferred with the kind of urgency usually reserved for ransom payments. I didn't know this officially. Of course, I was no longer part of the Northbridge ecosystem, no longer privy to their financial movements. But Jennifer Walsh from Steinberg was kind enough to send me a brief, professional note. "Ms. Grant, we wanted to inform you that the continuity provision matter has been resolved satisfactorily. We look forward to working with Northbridge's new relationship manager once proper notice has been given. Best wishes in your future endeavors." Future endeavors, as if I hadn't already won everything I needed to win. The real confirmation came from the Wall Street Journal article that ran 3 days later. Not about the penalty, that had been buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa, but about Victor Hale's departure from Northbridge Dynamics. To pursue other opportunities, the article said, the board thanks him for his contributions during his brief tenure. Brief tenure, 103 days, to be exact. The shortest CFO stint in Northbridge's history. Linda met me for coffee that Friday, exactly 1 week after my termination. She looked around the cafe nervously, as if corporate spies might be listening. "You're a legend," she whispered. "People are calling it the Grant Clause. Legal's been ordered to review every single contract for similar provisions. They found 4 more, all in agreements you managed." I stirred my latte, saying nothing. Let them search, let them review, let them spend hundreds of thousands in legal fees looking for more bombs I might have planted. The paranoia alone was worth more than the money. "They promoted that Princeton kid to your position," Linda continued. "First thing they made him do was read every contract, twice. He looks terrified constantly." Good. Fear was a better teacher than any MBA program. "And Victor?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Radioactive. Nobody will touch him. Word got out, nobody wants a CFO who fires people without reading their contracts. He's moved back to Boston. Heard he's consulting now." Consulting, the corporate equivalent of purgatory, where executives went when they'd failed too publicly to get another executive position, but too quietly to write a redemption book about it. Harrison Beck had called me 3 more times that week, each voicemail more conciliatory than the last. The final one had included a number, a salary offer that would have made me the highest-paid contract manager in New York, maybe the country. I'd deleted it without writing it down. Because here's what Harrison Beck and the board and everyone at Northbridge still didn't understand. It was never about the money. The $250,000 from Steinberg? That was just the bill for their education. The real payment was something that couldn't be wired or deposited or reported on a W-2. It was the knowledge that for once, just once, the system had worked exactly as designed. The person who'd written the rules had won the game. The one who'd been deemed redundant had proved to be essential. The contract had been honored, the clause had been triggered, and the penalty had been paid. Most importantly, Victor Hale had learned what I'd learned 3 years ago in that conference room. Holding someone else's failure like a live grenade, in corporate America, everyone is expendable until they're not. And by the time you figure out the difference, it's usually too late. I finished my coffee and stood to leave. Linda grabbed my hand. "Will you come back?" she asked. "If they offer enough?" I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Thought about walking back through those revolving doors, riding that elevator to the 40th floor, sitting in conference rooms with people who'd watched me get marched out with a banker's box. Thought about drafting contracts for executives who'd learn my name only when they needed someone to blame. "No," I said. I'm done with that game. What will you do? I smiled. I've had 3 offers this week. Turns out, people want to hire someone who can write a bulletproof contract. Someone who thinks 3 years ahead. Someone who protects their interests. And protects herself, Linda added. Especially that. I left the cafe and walked out into the October afternoon. The city hummed around me. Taxis, sirens, construction. The endless noise of ambition and survival. Somewhere in a glass tower, someone was getting fired. Somewhere else, someone was signing a contract they hadn't read. And somewhere, in some anonymous conference room, someone was asking, "How did we get here?" But I wasn't in any of those rooms anymore. I was outside, walking away, carrying nothing but the knowledge that sometimes, not often, but sometimes, the universe keeps perfect books. And when it does, it always collects. The end. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate karma and contractual justice. I'm curious. Where are you listening to this tale of revenge served with a side of legal precision? Drop a comment below and let me know if you're tuning in from your office. Hopefully not while planning your own corporate checkmate, during your commute, or perhaps while drafting your own bulletproof contracts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of workplace justice, and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed karma catch up with a terrible boss? Let's discuss in the comments below.